Hey guys, this is Sukanya Rana and welcome to Streak Initiative, your daily dose of UPSC preparation, and we'll be covering the important topics specifically from economics section this week. And I hope you are studying well for the prelims. Do attempt as many questions as you can. Do attempt as many mocks as you can. I think that is a very important strategy with respect to prelims. And keeping in view with that, we've got some questions which can be like your quick revisions for current affairs in the form of streak initiative. Now, before I move on to the first question of the day, a very important thing, again, please go and register down below in the description box for the one-on-one mentorship as well as your Telegram group, because you'll get good enough amount of free material for UPSC preparation here, the current affairs related, and as well as any guidance that you need. So that will help you out through your preparation for prelims. Now let's move on to the first question of the day. So the first question of the day is related to something which talks about an interest rate, right? So the question here is that with respect to the secured overnight financing rate, SOFR, consider the following statement. So basically the question is about what this particular financing rate is, and it was in current affairs, so you should know what it is. So the first statement here is that it is an influential interest rate that the banks use to price the US dollar nominated derivatives and loans, and it is based on transaction in treasury repurchase market. Now, this particular topic was in news because SBI had actually executed two interbank short-term money market deals with respect to this particular rate, that is SOFR rate. Now, this particular rate actually replaces something which has been there for a long time, which is called LIBOR rate, right? Which is London Interbank Offered rate. Now, LIBOR rate and even this rate is actually dealing with the interbank and immediate volatility necessities, like a small amount of money that is required, overnight pricing for overnight exchange. Those kind of exchanges are actually taken care of these particular rates, through these particular rates in the global market, right? So we actually had your LIBOR rate, but the thing is that LIBOR rate is now being planned to phase off. So by 2021, we are planning to, the global community is planning to phase off this particular rate. And what is coming in place of this is this secured overnight financing rate. Now, this this rate will provide an overnight facility for the banks to borrow and lend money from one bank to another. And I think this will take care of that short-term issues with respect to liquidity in the system. Now, why are we getting this system? Now, there was this basic issue with respect to LIBOR rate. Now, post the issues, the global regulators actually found out that with respect to LIBOR rate, post 2012, there was a lot of manipulation which was done with respect to this particular rate, and a lot of banks across the globe started manipulating it, and also this particular rate was not able to help you understand the volume that it was trading with. So these are some of the shortcomings, and keeping in view, this is the idea that the global community have taken, and they have replaced this particular LIBOR rate with SOFR. Now, SOFR makes sure that whatever transaction or whatever the data that it is collecting, that is from observable transaction, like the transaction which are happening. Whereas in case of LIBOR rate, what happened was the data that was collected was based upon estimated borrowing rates. So that kind of difference will help create more stronger and more a data which is more visibly visible, right? So it'll have a strong holding in case of lending and borrowing at the global level. So getting that background, I think it's much more easier to understand if these two options are right or not. And in fact, both of them are right here. If you can see, the first thing it talks about is it uses US dollar dominated derivatives and loans. So that statement is right. It is using, in fact, dollar here. And the second statement is that it is dealing with treasury repurchase market. So obviously, when you're talking about this overnight transaction, these bonds and treasury bills are actually bought by the banks, and through which the interest rate is decided, and lending borrowing happens in those cases. So I guess both the options here are right, and I believe you were able to attempt it. This is again a current affair based topic, so it's important that you are key on outlook of these such new developments in the monetary market, right? Next topic that we're talking about would cover the themes of, say, banking system and associated terminology. So priority sector lending is a very important term. And the ideology of the government with respect to inclusive financial system is carried out by one of this scheme, which is priority sector lending. So basic idea here, I think most of you understand, is that priority sector lending deals with setting aside a certain percentage of money and the loans which the banks will prioritize and give it to some of the section of the society which is much more vulnerable to others. So that is the basic ideology here. So let us read the first statement. What it says is that it is a mechanism through which adequate and timely credit is provided to sector important for the development of basic needs of the country. So this is the statement I just used to explain the idea behind priority sector lending. So I think this statement is very much correct. The next statement here is that foreign banks are exempted from priority sector lending. Now, if you've gone through what all basic features or basic guidelines with respect to PSLV is, there's a paper on the website of RBI. You can go through that. That's a very nice paper. It details out how this particular scheme works. So you'll get in-depth detail about it. So this statement is in fact wrong, because see, priority sector lending is not just limited to your public sector banks. Even though foreign banks are supposed to make sure that they set aside certain amount of their the net profits and all the credit that is supposed to be given, that is to be kept for this particular vulnerable section. So obviously the 40% of the limit is being decided right now by priority sector lending. So yeah, foreign banks have to follow the same set of regulations that are there for the domestic banks. So this particular statement is wrong. Now, another thing is, it's not just commercial banks. Even your regional rural banks, even your small finance bank, and even your cooperative banks, even they have to set aside certain amount for priority sector lending. And in fact, it is much more than the commercial banks. It's 75%. So that is also another thing that you should be pretty much aware about. Now the third statement here is that real estate consumer goods are included in the category of priority sector lending. So this is important. If you're studying about priority sector lending, you should know which all sectors are there in this particular segment. And in fact, recently RBI have been taking some steps to include more and more areas which come under this. So we've got some new elements like renewable energy, social infrastructure. So all these ideas have been recently added into the list of priority sector lending. Other than that, we've got common areas like MSMEs, agriculture, export, education, housing. So they have been there for a very longer time. So these are certain steps that have been taken by RBI to make sure the PSLVs, your PSL is working in a much more effective way. So yes, real estate and consumer goods are not part of this particular initiative. So again, third statement is wrong. So your answer here is A. Now, this topic is again important because in times of COVID, government is taking a lot of steps to make sure that the MSME sector is brought back into functioning. So that kind of area with respect to how MSME sector can be revived back is very important, both from, I think, mains point of view and the prelims point of view. So some of the steps that have been taken take care of that. Like recently, even RBI revised guidelines with respect to this particular scheme. So make sure that you go across all the steps that the government is taking with respect to these MSME, agriculture. How do we revive these particular areas in times of COVID is very important, right? So now let us shift to another question here. So this question is actually based upon a body. Now this body is National Agriculture Cooperative Marketing Federation of India Limited. See, the basic idea behind this question is a lot of time in prelims, such bodies are picked up and few of questions are made upon its functioning or members or chairman. Right. So it's very important that when you're going through your current affairs, make sure whatever bodies that have been mentioned in last 1 year, you just go through how, whether it is a statutory body, it is an autonomous body, under which ministry it is working, you should know this. Also, which year it was set up, what is the membership of that particular body, who is the chairman. Like there was this question on Quality Council of India in your prelims few years back, and they had asked how the chairman is appointed for that particular body. So these kind of questions are very important with respect to prelims. So make sure whenever you're revising your current affairs, you go through such bodies and read these particular details. So in this particular question, there are two details that we are asking, is that whether it is registered under Multi-State Cooperative Societies Act, and second is about its membership, and it says that agricultural farmers are the main members of NAFED. So again, two questions here with respect to membership and with respect to act under which it is set up. So both of them are right. In fact, this particular body has been a statutory body which has been established in 1958 under this particular Multiple State Cooperative Societies Act, and also majority of members in this particular body are farmers. They are responsible for general working, the general policy that this body is going to make sure how it works. So this body has been a lot involved in a lot of initiative this year. I think there was this related to a honey initiative in that it was a part of. So it is basically a marketing federation. So a lot of agricultural related marketing initiatives, this particular body is actually part of it. So take note of such bodies. It's not just one body that I'm talking about. Whatever bodies that you're reading throughout in your current affairs, take note of some of these points that I talked about, right? Next question is again a very interesting question here. So this question is actually about advantages of negative rate policy, and there are three options that have been given. That is whether it lowers the borrowing cost, it helps to boost the exports, and ultimately it puts downward pressure on entire yield curve. Now remember, the statement here says select the advantages. So be very careful. Again, you have to be very careful when you're attempting the questions. Make sure you make note of these keywords like advantages, disadvantages, or correct, not correct. So these are very important, because despite knowing the question, sometimes people make those silly mistakes and mark something that is not asked, that has not been asked in the question. So negative rate policy is something very simple. Like for a couple of years now, the Japanese economy has been facing a lot of issues. Like there's this downward growth, deflation that is going in that particular country. So the government has been taking a lot of economic initiatives. So one of that initiative that came up with respect to these policies, like even in Europe and Japan, we see the idea of negative rate policy that has been giving a lot of support from the government. So the basic idea behind negative rate policy is, see, right now in India, if you go to a bank and deposit a money. Say I go make an FD and deposit 1 lakh rupee. So I'll get an interest on it, right? I'll get 6% interest on it, whatever the interest rate right now is, but it's, I guess, somewhere around 6% only. So that kind of interest is something that I'll get when I deposit my money into the bank. But in case of negative rate policy, what happens is the interest rate goes below zero. So this means when I go and put my money in the bank and deposit it there, it's not the bank who's going to pay me interest rate. I will have to pay extra money for depositing that money into the bank, right? So you might think why a bank would do it, because if people are not depositing money into the banks, they'll ultimately have less profits. But see, the idea here is, the idea behind this particular policy is that government wants less stocking up of money, but more flow of money into the economy. So they want more and more investment. They want more and more flow of liquidity should increase into the market. Investment should increase. This will boost the demand. Ultimately, the jobs will be created. Employment will improve. So that kind of idea is actually supported by this particular policy when we are talking about negative rate policy, right? So let's look at the options then. So the first advantages of this, or advantage of this particular policy, would be that it lowers the borrowing cost. Again, like I talked about, the basic idea here is that the banks want, the government wants to increase the demand system, increase more and more investment. So obviously, the borrowing cost is going to reduce, and that is going to be a bigger advantage here. When interest rates drop, even the borrowing cost is going to drop. So that is a big advantage that can be derived from negative rate policy. Second thing here is that it boosts your export. Again, the idea behind this is same, that you get more and more demand, you get more and more investment. So it is ultimately going to increase the activity in the economy and boost your export. So that is also an advantage that you get out of this negative rate policy. Third thing here is that it puts a downward pressure on entire yield curve. Now, yield curve is related to your bond prices, if you remember. And there is this relationship between yield, price of the bond, and interest rate. So price of the interest rate and bond rate price of the bond rate goes in inverse proportion. So if the interest rate are increases, the bond price is going to decrease, right? Similarly, if bond price is going to decrease, the yield is going to improve. So this kind of relationship is created. So if you have interest rate policy which is increasing, that means you're going to have higher yield. Similarly, in negative rate policy, if your interest rates are going down, you'll obviously have a downward flow of the yield curve, right? So that this particular statement is true. But again, the answer of this particular question is going to be A, because this is not an advantage. You're getting lower yield, like the profits for somebody who's investing into the bonds is getting reduced. So this is not going to be an advantage. This is going to be a disadvantage that comes out of this negative rate policy. So again, like I told you, be very careful about these key terms of advantages, disadvantages, whatever the question is about, be very careful. Don't make such silly mistakes, right? So I think we're done with this question. Next question here is, so there was this question about cotton production was in news because we had this particular brand name which was created and it was in news. So whenever you see such kind of things, it's important to have a backward study of what is the general pattern of that particular industry. So if you're studying about, say, cotton production, you should know where does it stand in textile industry, the general pattern of production, how's it going, not detailed, but general pattern. Also, if you're talking about cotton, which states are producing it more, what is the percentage of, say, the top producing state, what about the export and import that is going in this particular area. So this is important. And in fact, cotton is very important because India produces a lot of cotton. In fact, it's the largest producer. So in that sense, this sector becomes very important, and that is why it's very important that even if you read, say, one news, say with respect to a brand name, you do some backward work with respect to that question. So this question was put by keeping that ideology in mind. So, which of the following statements with reference to cotton production in India are not correct? Again, keyword here is not correct. So, make sure you don't make that silly mistake. So, the first statement here is that the textile industry in India is predominantly cotton based. The second statement is that the textile industry is the largest employer in Indian economy. And the third is Kasturi cotton is the brand name of the premium Indian cotton in world trade. Now, this question I think can be done through elimination. Even if you don't know what place does cotton industry holds in the overall textile industry, I think this question can be easily done. So first thing, if you look at the second statement, it says here that it is the largest employer in the Indian economy. So this is a very common fact that we all know, that agriculture is the largest employer. We have a good amount of population that is employed into the agriculture, and after agriculture we have the textile industry, because even textile industry is a very labor intensive sector, and the government is actually promoting it. So maybe in few years when the policies work in the right way, so that shift might happen. But for now, we have agriculture at the top position. So by that logic, I think 2 is eliminated. So you automatically have A, which is wrong here, right? So we have B, C and D, which is left here, right? So now what we need to do is we need to find whether third is right or not. Now see, Kasturi cotton was something that was there in the current affairs, so I think this should be covered by you, right? So this should be covered by you and you should know, and this is the right statement. So we know this is the right statement, so we can easily eliminate D here. So out of 2 and 3, see, 2 is wrong. So we know that 2 should be there in your answer. So we've eliminated A, we've eliminated D because we know 3 is right. And what we are left is with 2, B and C, right? Now again, if you look at the first statement, it says that, see, the textile industry is predominantly dominated by cotton based. Now, again, you can apply your common sense here. See, textile industry, what would it have? Right now, it might have woolens, it might have cotton, it might have that polyester industry that is getting more and more support nowadays. So, these are few things. It might have silk. You know some of the textile that are there in the industry, right? So, compared to that, like woolen industry would not be as big as because considering the weather condition in India, you cannot have a really huge cotton industry, woolen industry. And I don't know if in NCRT you've seen the number of cotton producing textile, if you've seen, and if you compare it to woolen producing areas, then you can easily conclude that we have a lot of textile which is related to cotton based industry. So this particular question can actually be solved from your NCRT. If you remember that map, you know, there's this map which shows how many cotton based industries, and I think there are a lot in your South India. Though it is scattered across all India, but still. So through that map, you can understand, see, silk cannot be that predominant because it's a very high pricing industry. Even the polyester cannot have that much of involvement. So I think through common sense, you can easily mark out that, okay, this statement is actually not correct. This statement is actually, the first statement is actually correct, right? So we have the first statement which is correct, we have the second statement which is not correct, and we have the third statement which is correct. So the question here is not correct, so obviously your option will become B. So be very careful about this correct, not correct. Okay, this can be confusing sometimes even in your paper, so take care of this thing. Don't make silly mistakes because you cannot afford them in the prelims. So I guess that's it for today, guys. All the best for your preparation. Keep on revising, keep on attempting more and more questions. I think that is the key here. Again, register in the link that is provided, and all the best.
Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon on the YouTube app and never miss another update from Civilsdaily.